The bench creaked under me as I leaned back, letting the warmth of the sun press against my face. For once, the world felt still. My thoughts were my own until I noticed him. A tall man in a crisp suit strolled across the path, his shoes clicking against the pavement. Beside him, a little girl clutched his hand, her steps hesitant, her eyes darting everywhere but at him. I offered a small smile. "Afternoon," his head barely turned. The sound was clipped, dismissive, like I was background noise. The girl's gaze lingered, though. Wide eyes, curious, sad. She looked at me as though I might understand something her father never could. I leaned forward slightly. "Hey there." Before she could respond if she wanted to, her father tightened his grip. "She doesn't speak," he snapped. "Don't bother." His tone made my chest tighten. Not just impatient, not just protective. There was something else, something sharp, pointed. I looked at him fully now. "Sometimes people don't speak," I said quietly, because no one listens. For a second, her eyes lit up, the way a candle flickers when the match finally touches the wick. I could see it, hope, maybe even recognition. But he yanked her closer, breaking the moment. "People like you," he muttered under his breath, "ought to mind their business." The words hit harder than a slap. My jaw tightened, but I kept my eyes on him. He wouldn't meet them. He tugged the girl forward, walking away as if the ground itself might stain him if he lingered near me too long. I sat back slowly, my fists curling on my knees. I told myself not to care, not to let it dig in. But the girl's face stayed with me, the way she looked at me, like she wanted to say something, anything. But the world around her had already decided she didn't have a voice. And the man's voice, his words echoing, burned inside me. "People like you." It wasn't just dismissal, it was a line drawn in the dirt. A reminder that in his eyes I'd never be more than what he already decided I was. I stayed on that bench long after they were gone, staring at the swing set rocking in the breeze. I told myself I wouldn't forget the look in her eyes. Not her silence. Not his contempt. Both had spoken louder than words ever could. I saw them again the next day. Same park, same path. The girl's little shoes tapped against the concrete as she ran to the swings. Her father trailed behind her, his eyes narrowing the moment he spotted me. "You must have a lot of time to sit around here," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Some of us work hard for what we have." His words carried more than arrogance. They dripped with something colder. I kept my voice even. "Looks to me like you've worked for everything except her smile." His lips curled, part sneer, part smirk. "She's mute. You wouldn't understand medical conditions." The way he said "you" made my chest tighten. It wasn't about medicine. It was about me, my skin, my place. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "Mute doesn't mean invisible. I can see how badly she wants to be heard." His chuckle was harsh, empty of humor. "You think a few soft words will fix her? Don't be ridiculous. Doctors tried, specialists tried, and you?" He gestured at me, head to toe. "What could you possibly do that they haven't?" The insult wasn't just sharp, it was deliberate. He wanted me to shrink, to accept his dismissal as truth. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm not trying to fix her," I said. "I just want to listen." He barked out a laugh that made the girl turn her head from the swing, her small hands tightening on the chain. "Listen, she doesn't have words, that's the whole point." "She does," I said quietly. "You just don't hear them." For a moment, his eyes flickered, but pride stiffened his shoulders. "Enough," he snapped. "Stay away from her." The girl's gaze lingered on me, wide and uncertain, as if her silence begged me not to walk away. My heart pounded, not from his anger, but from the weight of her eyes. He tugged her hand when she hopped off the swing. "Let's go," he ordered, his voice hard. As they left, his words echoed inside me. What could you possibly do? It wasn't just about her voice. It was about mine. About how men like him had spent lifetimes deciding who was allowed to be heard, and who would remain silent. I sat on that bench long after they were gone, the wound of his words still burning. Her father's phone buzzed. I heard his irritated sigh as he stepped a few feet away, snapping it open. His voice turned sharp, low, the kind of business tone that had no room for softness. The girl stayed behind, clutching her doll like it was the only safe thing in the world. She didn't move toward the swings. She just stood there, stealing. Glances at me. I leaned forward on the bench. "Hey," I whispered. Her eyes widened. But she didn't run. "You don't have to speak if you're not ready," I said gently. "But I'll listen, even if it's just silence." Her fingers tightened around the doll's dress. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "I know what it's like," I added. My voice caught a little. "When the world decides your voice. Doesn't matter, when people talk over you, when they look right through you." Her lips trembled, but no sound came. I sank down to her level, crouching so my eyes met hers. "It doesn't mean you're broken." "It doesn't mean you don't have something worth saying." Her eyes glistened, tears forming at the edges. I felt my chest ache because I saw myself in her silence. So I hummed, low, steady. The tune my grandmother used to sing when words weren't enough. A lullaby that carried more comfort than sentences ever could. Her shoulders shook. Her lips parted. For a second I thought it was only air escaping, but then, "Hi." The word was broken, fragile, but it was there. My breath caught. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "You did it," I whispered. My throat tightened, but I kept my eyes steady on hers. "You spoke." Her hands dropped the doll. She blinked, as if she didn't believe it herself. Then she tried again, softer but clearer. "Hi." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. That single word carried more weight than any speech I'd ever heard. Her father's voice barked. "Behind me, we're leaving." She turned, panic flashing in her eyes, then tugged on his sleeve before he could drag her away. "Hi." The man froze. I stood slowly, my chest still heaving. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Her little hand tightened on the doll for a moment, then slowly she looked up at me, her lips parted. "Hi, Daddy." I froze with her. My chest tightened, and I could feel every nerve in my body humming. His phone slipped from his fingers. He barely noticed, staring at her like she'd sprouted wings overnight. His lips trembled, his eyes wide. What did you do?" His voice shook, high and angry and desperate all at once. "What trick is this?" I shook my head slowly, keeping my tone calm. "I didn't do anything." She chose to speak. He blinked, disbelief pressing down like a weight. No, that's impossible. I've spent years making sure doctors, specialists..." He stopped, his chest rising and falling fast. What did you say to her?" I let a slow breath out, steadying myself. Nothing that mattered more than listening. He stepped closer, his face flushing red with anger and confusion. "This is manipulation. You made her speak. You..." She tugged at my sleeve, suddenly burying her face into my side. "Don't go," she whispered. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the warmth, the trust, the sudden weight of her little body. It was the first time anyone had let her show affection, and she chose me. He scowled at the sight, fumbling for words. She wouldn't have, she's mine." "Yes," I said softly, keeping my voice even, "and she is. Hers too. Her voice belongs to her." He flinched, the tremor in his jaw betraying him. Pride and fury battled across his features. I gave her everything. I didn't flinch. "Everything but your ears," I said. "Everything but the courage to let her be heard." His face went red, then pale, then red again. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. She pulled back from me just enough to look at him, tiny and fierce. "Stop yelling, Daddy." He froze again, and this time it wasn't shock, this time it was silence. For a long, suspended moment he had no words. I could feel her pulse against my chest, her little breaths trembling. I whispered, "It's okay. You can speak, you can always speak." She nodded, burying her face into me once more. The father stood there, frozen, trembling with disbelief and anger and something I couldn't name yet. Finally, he took a step back, his fists clenching at his sides. How could this happen?" I met his gaze steadily. "It happened because she wanted it to. Not me, not you, her." He flinched, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw the walls he'd built around his arrogance crack. And in that crack, I felt her courage shine brighter than anything else. A small group had gathered around us, drawn by the tension that radiated off him. I could hear whispers, curious, judgmental, unsure. He spun toward me, face red, voice shaking. You've been interfering with my child." His hand pointed. Sharply, accusing. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "Do you?" I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat and met his glare. "I haven't interfered," I said firmly. "I just listened." His laugh was bitter, sharp. "Listened? You think listening changes reality? You think you can play savior, huh? Stay in your place?" Something in my chest tightened, but I didn't back down. "Not here, not now. You don't understand," he spat. "She's mine. You have no right to—" I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm, though every nerve screamed. Her silence wasn't illness. It wasn't some medical failure. It was fear. Fear of you. You silenced her. Not life, not doctors, not circumstance. You— A gasp went through the crowd. I could feel their eyes, burning, some sympathetic, some shocked. Her tiny hand slipped into mine, clutching tightly. "Don't leave," she whispered. My chest ached at her words, the vulnerability, the trust she gave me. I bent slightly and whispered back, "I'm not going anywhere." He stiffened, fury battling with the flicker of shame that passed too quickly across his face. "Shame? Me?" His voice rose, trembling. You don't know anything about responsibility. About parenting. I gave her everything." "Yes," I said quietly, "everything but your presence. Everything but your willingness to listen. Everything but your recognition that she was more than an object, more than your possession." He took a step forward, fist trembling, and I could see him struggling. His pride wouldn't allow him to simply hear the truth. Instead, he shouted, louder, venom dripping from every word. "How dare you? You think you're better than me? You think a man like you can teach me anything about my own child?" I stood my ground. "Better?" I said softly. "No, I just see what you refuse to see, and now the world sees it too." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Some shook their heads. Others stared in stunned silence. The power had shifted subtly, irreversibly. She leaned against me, small but firm. "Don't leave," she said again, and I felt her trust anchor me. He looked at us both, chest heaving, jaw tight. Anger, shame, disbelief, and pride warred visibly on his face. I didn't need to say more. The silence between us spoke volumes. And in that silence I knew the moment had passed from him. It belonged to her now. I knelt before her, my knees pressing into the soft grass, and met her wide, hesitant eyes. "You have a voice?" I said, my voice steady, soft but certain. "Don't ever let anyone take it from you." Her fingers tightened around her doll. She hesitated, then slowly, deliberately, she whispered, my voice. I could see it hit him. His posture stiffened, a flicker of something between shock and disbelief crossing his face. He staggered back, almost as if the words pushed him physically. I stood, keeping my tone calm, firm, but without a trace of anger. She didn't need a doctor. She needed someone to see her, to hear her, to give her the space to speak. Her chest rose, trembling with courage, and then she shouted loud and clear, "Stop yelling, Daddy!" Every sound in the park seemed to vanish. Birds froze mid-flight. Nearby children went still. Even the murmuring crowd fell silent. Her voice carried not small, not fragile, but alive and real. He blinked rapidly, unable to respond, his jaw tight, hands clenching at his sides. Pride, control, and shock warred across his face. I watched her, letting her feel the power of her own words. "My voice," she repeated, louder this time, as if sealing it into the world. He took a step back, hand twitching near his face. His eyes darted from her to me, disbelief and confusion battling with the anger that still lingered. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her command the space entirely. The power wasn't mine. It had shifted to her, the tiny girl who had been silent, who had waited long enough to be heard. She looked at me once, gratitude and pride shining in her gaze. Then she turned to him, steady and fearless. "My voice." He froze again, the weight of her words pressing on him like nothing else could. I could feel the tension crack him open just a little, showing the raw truth of what had been ignored. For so long, the crowd stayed silent, watching, waiting, feeling the shift. Her courage radiated, and in that moment, I knew nothing would ever silence her again. He sank onto the bench with a thud, shoulders slumped as though the world had pressed down on him all at once. I stayed a few feet away, silent, letting the tension settle around us. I gave her everything, he muttered, voice low, shaky. Money, comfort, opportunities, why wasn't it enough? His words fell heavy, but it wasn't anger that reached me. It was the raw, empty ache of pride, colliding with truth. I knelt slightly, keeping my tone quiet and firm. Because you never gave her your ears, I said. He froze at that, fingers tightening around the edge of the bench. His hands shook as he lifted them to his face, hiding his eyes from the world. And perhaps from himself. I don't know how, he whispered, barely audible, as if confessing a sin he couldn't face. Her tiny fingers reached for his hand cautiously. Listen, she said softly, pressing her warmth against his trembling skin. The simplicity of that single word cut deeper than any accusation, deeper than any prideful speech he had ever delivered. It carried patience, clarity, and courage, everything he had refused to offer her. He shivered at her touch, head bowed, the mask of arrogance cracking. Tears began to streak down his cheeks, unbidden and unstoppable. I failed you, he admitted, voice breaking. I stayed silent, letting her take the lead, letting him confront what he had ignored for years. Listen, she repeated, firmer this time, leaning slightly closer. Just listen. The father's face crumpled further, the walls he'd built around his ego now gone. His chest heaved, sobs escaping, the arrogance stripped away by the weight of truth and the strength of her voice. I put a hand lightly on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that she had led the moment. She had taken the power for herself, and in doing so, changed the man before her, whether he could admit it fully or not. For a long while, none of us spoke. The air hung heavy with confession, humility, and fragile redemption. Then, in the quiet, I whispered, "This is how change begins." She squeezed his hand, and for the first time he didn't pull away. He simply listened. A few days later, I returned to the park. My steps slowed when I saw them, her small figure darting toward the swings, chattering in short, shy bursts. Each word was hesitant but deliberate, a small triumph in itself. She spotted me and waved, her smile bright and real. Her father walked behind her, slower this time, eyes softer, shoulders less rigid. There was still guilt there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer weighed down his every move. He noticed me standing nearby, hesitated, and then took a deep breath. "I judged you," he said, voice low, hesitant, almost vulnerable. "I judged everyone. But you gave me my daughter's voice." I shook my head gently, keeping my tone calm. She gave it to herself. All I did was listen. He swallowed hard, eyes flicking to his daughter as she laughed at something small, a bird landing too close. A squeaky swing, and the sound filled the space around us. It was unforced, unguarded, pure. I sat on the bench a few feet away from them, letting the moment stretch, letting the warmth of her words and laughter settle around us. She came over and sat beside me, swinging her legs, eyes shining with curiosity and trust. "Did you miss me?" she asked, voice small but confident. "I did," I replied, smiling. "But I've been watching you find your words." That was the best part. Her father remained standing, awkward, unsure where to place himself, yet he didn't interrupt. He simply observed, watching her freedom bloom, watching the weight he had carried dissolve in the presence of her voice. She talks so much now," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. "And I was the one silencing her all along." I didn't answer immediately. I simply watched, reflecting on how fragile pride can be, how heavy assumptions and fear of difference can hold someone back. I thought of the countless others who never hear themselves in a world too busy listening to power, wealth, or status. The child tugged gently at my sleeve. "Tell me a story," she said, leaning into me with complete trust. I smiled and began to hum a tune my grandmother had taught me, a song for words that once couldn't be spoken. She listened, eyes wide, before she began filling in phrases of her own, little words stacking into sentences, sentences forming laughter. Her father finally sat on the bench beside us, close but cautious, watching her, listening in a way he had never done before. His guilt softened, replaced by awe, and I could see the first real understanding in his eyes. "She's remarkable," he whispered. I nodded silently. "She always was. You just had to step back and let her speak." The day stretched quietly around us. No lectures, no blame, no harsh words, just the simple sound of a child discovering her power, and a man learning humility too late to undo the past. But in time to witness transformation, I watched her run again, shouting a single word into the wind, and it carried, free, bright, alive. I felt it settle in me, a reminder that sometimes the loudest change begins with the quietest voices. And in that moment, I understood. Listening is the first act of justice, and courage doesn't always roar, it often whispers until someone finally hears it.